Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Caffin, VP of Marketing at Bigleaf Networks. Thanks for joining us today for today's webinar, Putting SD-WAN to Work for Your SMB Customers. We're excited to see so many folks with us today, and we're looking forward to sharing our perspective on SD-WAN for SMBs, as well as how you can leverage SD-WAN to grow your own SMB business. Before we get started, I wanted to just cover a couple of housekeeping items. First, there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box in your GoToWebinar app, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. We are also recording this session, so we'll be sharing that recording with you after the webinar. That means there's no need to try to frantically take notes while we're talking. Go ahead and enjoy the presentation. We'll make sure to send out the materials afterwards. So with all of that out of the way, I am thrilled to introduce our co-founder and VP of Sales, Jeff Burchett.
Thanks, Aaron. And thanks everybody for taking the time this morning to hop on and learn a little bit more about how SD-WAN plays into SMB customers. To set the expectation and agenda for today, really what we wanted to focus on was just as the title says, SD-WAN for SMBs. You know, while SD-WAN and Bigleaf included is applicable across all market segments, including enterprise and mid-market, those two segments, frankly, get a disproportional amount of attention when it comes to SD-WAN. And for us here at Bigleaf, we've got hundreds of partners with thousands of SMB customers that oftentimes aren't looking at SD-WAN as the right fit for those customers. When indeed, as we see it, SD-WAN is critical for the future success of technology in these SMB customers. We want to be able to hit on that today. To get started, this is an infographic from the 2019 SaaS Trends Report recently released by Blissfully. For those of you guys that aren't familiar, Blissfully is a SaaS management company that does some really interesting things for companies using a lot of different SaaS applications. When I personally came across this report, I was floored by it. I found a ton of tremendous information in here as it relates to SaaS and SMBs and the correlation between that and networking. I think when we talk about SD-WAN and we start to include cloud into those conversations, we have a habit of going straight to pure play cloud, right? Things like AWS and Azure and Google Compute. And while those are critical applications for many businesses, oftentimes those are targeted enterprise customers. I talk to a lot of partners and a lot of SMB customers that regularly say, well, I'm not doing anything in the cloud, so I don't really need SD-WAN. But when you start to unpack cloud away from just pure play and you start to talk about things like UCaaS and SaaS, we uncover a lot more opportunity. There are a couple of interesting things I want to highlight in this report and an infographic. The first one up here under spend, that the average SMB spends over $2,100 per employee per year on SaaS. If you think about that, we talk a lot about UCaaS and SD-WAN, but if you look at the average UCaaS seat, if you're spending $25 per employee per month on UCaaS, that's only $300 a year. The average SMB is spending 7 times that on SaaS alone. And of the SaaS applications they're using, according to Blissfully, 44% of those applications are going to be turned over in a 2-year period. And all those applications are spread across a bunch of unique billing owners. This isn't something that's managed solely by IT anymore. And then you look at right in the middle of the graphic, if you have 71 employees accessing 79 different SaaS applications, that's 584 unique connections riding over the top of that internet connection. That creates a tremendous opportunity and challenge for IT leadership and the partners supporting that IT leadership in SMB customers. One of the first challenges being the internet itself. As many of you know, the internet can be a very unpredictable place. These first 2 numbers on this diagram actually come from our own data. We're monitoring tens of thousands of internet connections 10 times a second across North America today. And what we see on average is the average internet connection is down 3.5 hours a month. Now we'll acknowledge that isn't in a single block, that's an aggregate. It could be 5 minutes here and 3 minutes there, but still 3.5 hours of downtime. And that number I think is somewhat concerning, but the number that scares me frankly the most is the second one. That 23 hours a month, the average internet connection is operating at an unusable performance level, meaning the green light on the modem or the router is on, but the performance on that connection is so bad that you can't use all of those different SaaS and UCaaS applications over the top of it. This challenge is compounded by the fact that many SMB users don't consult their IT leadership, their MSP, or their sales partners before adding new SaaS applications to the network. I mean, if you think about it, in today's day and age, anybody with a laptop and a credit card can sign up for a new SaaS application that could be critical to their ability to do their job. And to compound that even further, these applications themselves are changing on a regular basis. Meaning that how an application operates today may be completely different next week due to a new release by the SaaS provider themselves. And when you put all of these together, we end up in this never-ending game of whack-a-mole for both internal IT administrators and external partners, such as managed service providers, constantly chasing down issues as the landscape changes and internet connections vary. This is a recipe for disaster. There's no successful way to manage this without introducing some new technology into the environment. And that's where we think SD-WAN is a very interesting play. Another way to break this down when you're looking at this from the perspective of, again, whether you're an internal IT leader or an outsourced party like a managed service providers, is this is what the world looks like for many of these people. That the LAN itself is something they've been working on for 15, 20 years, and they've got it wired, they've got it buttoned down, they've got it working the way that it's supposed to be. And over the last 5 years, they've started to develop really strong SaaS strategies and management protocols. But even with these two components nailed perfectly, there's a big old challenge in the middle, and that's the internet itself. And this is where we see SD-WAN and this concept of a site-to-cloud architecture being critical for the success of SMBs in the future. Now, when it comes to SD-WAN for small to medium businesses, there appears to be a lot of different options out there. But when you start to look at the unique needs of small to medium businesses, you start to see that things vary when we talk about this concept of a site-to-cloud architecture. For many customers and managed service providers and VARs and third-party IT organizations, the firewall is the first place you look. There's been a big movement over the last 2 to 3 years of firewalls trying to introduce SD-WAN functionality in the form of dual WAN connectivity. And while there's a tremendous amount of value in this functionality for basic failover and for site-to-site architecture, it's very limited in applications running to and from the cloud. As you look to more specialized SD-WAN appliances, there's a whole generation of new hardware manufacturers focused exclusively on SD-WAN. But for many of these manufacturers, they were built with the idea that they could do private site-to-site wide area networks better than MPLS. And to their credit, they do a very good job at that. But when your model is based on the concept of putting a box at 2 different locations, what happens when you can't put the box somewhere? What happens when you're trying to get to somewhere like Salesforce or Office 365 where you don't have the opportunity to put infrastructure into that environment? Which leads us down to network-based SD-WAN solutions, Bigleaf included, that leverage a backbone for that bidirectional control of cloud traffic. For us here at Bigleaf, we focus heavily on this space, designing a solution exclusively for that site-to-cloud architecture, leveraging intelligent software and a transparent outside of the firewall deployment to give our partners and their end customers greater visibility and control over that site-to-cloud activity and the performance of their SaaS applications. What that looks like at a very high level is focusing on where SaaS itself lives. If you think about it, all these SaaS and cloud applications that our customers are trying to reach originate in the backbone of the internet. So we need to be there first. That's where our backbone network comes into play, connecting either directly to thousands of different cloud applications or to the underlying carrier supporting those applications, while also existing at the customer prem, putting our on-site router, again, outside of the customer firewall at each location, and wrapping our intelligent software around all of these different components to create the environment that our customers are looking for to really succeed in leveraging SaaS. For us, this is what the basic architecture looks like and how we can help you and ultimately your customers create a disaster-proof environment and connection to cloud, SaaS, and UCaaS applications. I want to acknowledge the infrastructure and connectivity that we have as part of our solution, but at the same time, I want to also think that, or acknowledge that we want to keep this to a 30-minute presentation. There's a tremendous amount of information that we can get into about the architecture and the technology itself that today's meant to basically be an introduction to that, with the idea that we'd love to engage with each of you directly to take deeper dives with you and your technical teams in the future. For us, when we talk about this concept of a site to cloud architecture, we think redundancy is a critical component of it. We're often telling our customers the best way to connect to the cloud is to leverage 2 or more carriers and have redundant connectivity. Well, we need to build that type of redundancy into our network alone. And we've looked at that at every single component of the Bigleaf solution. At the network level, using fully redundant hardware at each one of our POPs, connecting all of our POPs with redundant network connectivity, leveraging connectivity between our on-site router and redundant POPs for every single customer solution, and giving customers the option of having redundant hardware at each one of their locations as well. This redundant architecture gives us a disaster-proof way to connect to thousands of different cloud and SaaS applications that our customers are trying to reach every single day. But the network itself isn't enough. Really, to unlock the power of Bigleaf, you need to look at the software and the functionality itself. We oftentimes talk about Bigleaf being a more intelligent way to leverage the internet when it comes to SaaS, UCaaS, and cloud, adding intelligence onto your internet connection or internet pipe today. This comes in several different forms. The first one being monitoring itself, being able to measure each one of the customer's internet connections 10 times a second to look for not just on and off or up and down, but latency, packet loss, jitter, measuring that 10 times a second to get an accurate assessment of what's going on those internet connections each and every day. And then layering functionality like dynamic QoS, adding bi-directional intelligence to multiple applications riding over the top of that internet connection. And doing that in a manner that happens automatically and autonomously, not requiring you as the partner or your customer's internal IT leadership to craft unique policies for every one of those 79 applications that those 71 different employees are accessing. If you think about 584 unique connections, you could never keep up from a policy standpoint on managing all of that. And then giving our customers the ability to really uniquely and effectively leverage multiple internet connections. We know that from a sales standpoint for each one of you that all of you would love your customers to have multiple internet connections. But we also acknowledge that selling backup internet can be very hard, right? If you think about a traditional backup internet connection, what you're asking your customer to do is to pay for 2 different connections, knowing that they're only ever going to use one. And if they're using the second, that means something really bad happened. Rather, what we wanted to bring to the table for both you as our partners and for your end customers is this idea that having multiple internet connections should mean not only using all of those connections, but using them for what they're best for. Understanding the unique performance on each one of those connections, at the same time understanding the unique needs of each one of those applications and marrying them up in real time to create the best possible environment. And then as scenarios change and things happen, giving you and your customers a means to seamlessly, consistently, and easily move traffic between those internet connections without interruption. Also without a bunch of unique policies and confusing rules to hope that you're managing each application across multiple internet connections effectively. Rather, being able to ensure that every single application your customer is using is going to move seamlessly between those internet connections without you having to uniquely configure a policy for each one. But all of that functionality, while very useful to your customers and protecting them from these issues, isn't enough. While users shouldn't have to know that they're using a different internet connection to access Salesforce or Office 365 or their UCaaS application, you as their trusted advisor and managed service provider and sales partner, need to know what's going on with each of those connections. And that's where our alerting comes into play. Alerting you both real time of issues affecting any one of those internet connections, and taking all of those alerts in aggregate to better understand what's going on those internet connections, both at a moment's notice and historically over the top of those internet connections. And then using that data to help you and your customers right size both the type of internet connectivity you need, the number of connections you need, and the size of the pipes to build really the most optimized environment for you and your customers. And doing all of this in a manner that's firewall friendly. I think this is one of the unique strategies that we here at Bigleaf have taken in the SD-WAN market. I think for a lot of SD-WAN players out there today, the concept of integrating security and SD-WAN into a single solution has been the primary area of focus. And credit to those who have done it well and found scenarios where that works. But for a lot of you dealing with SMB customers, those customers already have firewalls in place. Oftentimes you're the one managing those firewalls, and you've built your business model around optimization of those firewalls and manage those in the most effective manner. And when SD-WAN solutions come to the table that ask you to either remove those firewalls or significantly alter the configuration of those firewalls, not only does that create a new security risk for you, but that creates a new business risk for you and how you're going to manage a certain subset of your customers. Here at Bigleaf, we've taken a contrarian point of view. We've tried to separate security and SD-WAN, making them transparent to each other and giving you the ability to make a best-of-breed decision when it comes to security alongside a best-of-breed decision when it comes to SD-WAN without any compromise anywhere along the way. So how does this play out? Well, I think we look at this really under two different lenses. The first one being the business case for our MSP partners, our VARs, and our telecom agents that are selling SD-WAN and choosing to sell Bigleaf. With the business case being generating more recurring revenue, setting you up for success for cloud and SaaS deployments in the future, and improving customer stickiness without creating a bunch of extra expense for you as a business. While also acknowledging that there's a tremendous amount of value on the operational side of your business as well. That every time there's an internet related issue, it's not creating new support issues for you and your organization. And giving you a solution that you can implement without having to spin up a whole new technical team inside your organization for the unique management of SD-WAN. And giving you a means to deploy SD-WAN where and how you need to be without wholesale changes to your firewalls or the customers using those firewalls. This is a quote from a longtime Bigleaf partner that I take a tremendous amount of pride in. That we've made it simple to upgrade the internet and leverage SaaS and UCaaS and cloud applications in the future. And when we do it well and we work with our partners over an extended period of time, much like we've done with Kyle, that it's not a reactive sale anymore. It's not something that's limited only to those customers that are having issues, but rather every single customer that is deploying these applications, Matrix has made it a mandatory part of their offering. Oftentimes when we get in these webinars, everybody wants a glimpse of, well, what does this look like from a pricing standpoint? How does this break out? And much like the SaaS solutions that you're selling and supporting, we have a similar economic model as well, where you or your customer are signing up for a subscription service, billed every single month with the associated operational expectations and support model that you would expect to see from that. And we want to make this easy for each of you guys. I think one of the mantras that's been really important to me here at Bigleaf is we need to be embarrassingly easy to work with. We need to be easy for each of you to sell. We need to be easy for you to market. We need to be easy for you to talk about. We need to be easy for you to install, to support, to work with, and to ultimately have success with your customers. And frankly, if we're not easy to work with, call us out on it, because that's a critical component of our business model moving forward. So acknowledging that we're about 20 minutes into the webinar here, I want to open some time up for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We do have a number of questions coming in. The first question that we got is, how How do I start a conversation about SD-WAN with SMB customers?
Great question. This is a fun activity that I actually frankly love to do with both customers and partners. There's a really easy way to do it. Go into your customer's office with a blank 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and a pen. Flip that thing horizontally and draw 2 lines so you have 3 columns across the paper. And in column number 1, sit down with your customer and brainstorm. What are the top 5 applications that the business is leveraging today? They could be anything from voice to CRM to ERP, maybe contact center, maybe a unique application they built in-house, whatever it may be. Just identify what those top 5 applications are, the applications that are touching the most users and have the greatest impact on the business. In the column next to that, list out where do those applications live today, right? Are they on a couple servers down the hallway in the IT closet? Are they running in a SaaS environment like Office 365 or Salesforce? Are they at AWS or Azure? Are they in a third-party data center? Maybe it's a data center you're managing on their behalf, but where do those applications live today? And in the third column, take those same 5 applications, think not where they're going to live today, but where do we think they're going to live in the next 5 years? And if we can understand what applications are most important, where they live today, and where they're going to be in the future, you now have the roadmap to build the right network for that customer to ensure that the network is really fulfilling its most important obligation, and that is to connect users to the most important applications they need to do their job every single day. And my guess is what you see as you do that is that some of those applications today live in SaaS environments, in cloud environments, in UCaaS environments, but some of them still live on-prem. But 3 to 5 years from now, they're all going to be in SaaS and cloud environments. And you need to put a network in place today that's going to meet both the needs of those applications today as well as in the future.
Great, thanks. The second question is voice related. They're asking, we have customers that use cloud, but their primary concern is VoIP. Can you help with VoIP services?
VoIP has been our calling card from day one. Frankly, that was one of the applications that Joel, my founder and technical lead, really thought about when he first started architecting what became Bigleaf. Because VoIP has very unique needs, as we all know. It's literally a two-way conversation. It is bi-directional traffic. And on top of that, it is very, very performance sensitive. And oftentimes it's traveling over the top of internet connections that were never designed to support VoIP. At Bigleaf, we look at VoIP with a few different parts of our feature set. The first one being our bi-directional quality of service. You know, quality of service is great in an MPLS environment when you can tag and control traffic and the carrier is going to honor those tags from end to end in a private WAN. But when you can't take an MPLS connection to a UCaaS provider, that story breaks down because you don't get bi-directional QoS over public internet connections. That's where our dynamic QoS comes into play, that we can identify that traffic, we can prioritize that traffic, and we control it end to end between you and your UCaaS provider, giving you the best possible experience over the top of that internet connection. And then in scenarios where we need to move those calls between internet connections, our same IP failover comes into play, because we can maintain a public IP address regardless of which internet connection we happen to be using to deliver that VoIP traffic. And if you maintain the IP address, you maintain the session. And you can maintain a call regardless of which internet connection you're using and transitioning between those internet connections.
All right. The next question is a little bit more sales related. They were asking, what are the most common objections you get from SMB customers and how do you address them?
Yeah, you know, I think the first one is that if you Google SD-WAN, the majority of the content that you're going to get back is around SD-WAN and how it relates to enterprise customers and enterprise applications, how it's going to save you money on big, complex MPLS networks. And if you're an SMB going, well, I don't have an MPLS network because I only have one location, or I've got 3 locations, but I'm using a VPN to connect them together, and I don't see myself as an enterprise, this is a technology that isn't applicable to me. And that's where having conversations about the applications themselves, such as SaaS, becomes a really important part of that conversation. Beyond that, I think a lot of people look at SD-WAN as too complex for SMB customers. And we at Bigleaf take a tremendous amount of pride of making our application very simple to deploy, very simple to use, so you don't need to spend a bunch of time creating unique policies and configurations to really unlock the value of SD-WAN. And I think the last one is for a lot of cost-conscious SMB customers understanding, well, I already have an internet connection, and it's fiber, and it's a gig, so I shouldn't need this sort of stuff. And walking those customers through, first off, just because you have a big internet connection doesn't mean you have a quality internet connection. And just because something's on fiber doesn't mean it's going to necessarily give you better performance. Yeah, it should, but there's no promises there. And really, when you frame the additional cost of SD-WAN and a second internet connection relative to a single internet connection, it looks very big. But when you frame it around that cost of, Mr. Customer or Miss Customer, you're spending on average $2,100 a month per employee, or $2,100 per year per employee on SaaS applications. The additional cost of SD-WAN and a second internet connection are trivial and critical to the success of not only the use of those applications, but the people dependent on those applications.
Great. The next question we have is, we have customers using VeloCloud provided by their VoIP provider. What will be involved if we want to replace VeloCloud with Bigleaf without interrupting VoIP and other services?
Yeah, I think part of our architecture and the reason that we are firewall friendly is while we're adding a tremendous amount of intelligence and visibility and control to those internet connections that you're using, the handoff that we give you into your environment, the handoff between our router and your firewall looks like a public internet connection to that firewall. So migrating a customer away from another SD-WAN solution and integrating into the existing firewall that's sitting there today, frankly, looks the same as if you were to just remove SD-WAN and put a new internet connection into that firewall. You configure us as if we were simply an internet connection in the firewall. You craft policies and configurations accordingly, and then everything we do for that voice traffic as well as everything else that the customer is running, including SaaS over top of that, we automatically identify, prioritize it, and move appropriately. So there's no unique configuration to the applications nor the firewall or your customer environment other than updating the IP addresses to reflect that you're using Bigleaf IP addresses, not carrier IP addresses anymore.
Great. And we've got time for one more question here real quick. Is there any resistance to changing their IP addresses?
I think that's a great question. And I don't want to trivialize, changing IP addresses. For those of you on the call that are network or system administrators and understand what that takes, there is work involved. You're going to have some work in one evening when users aren't impacted to move away from your carrier IP addresses and over to Bigleaf IP addresses. That work is the same as if you were to change internet providers. So whether it's your customer coming to you saying, hey, look at this deal I'm getting from ABC cable provider for a bunch of bandwidth for cheap, I want to take advantage of that. You have to acknowledge, okay, great, if we're going to change internet providers, we need to update IP addresses. That's the same work as if you were to move to a more intelligent internet solution leveraging Bigleaf. The good news is once you get through that work and you are using Bigleaf IP addresses, changing carriers and the associated IP address changes in the future are super easy because there's no change to the firewall or to the customer environment itself. Anytime you want to swap out internet providers and Bigleaf's in place, you simply reach out to our 24/7 support team and say, hey, I'm swapping out internet provider A and the associated IP addresses or DHCP handoff or PPPoE or whatever it may be to a new internet provider, and here's their updated configuration. We can make that change remotely. You simply unplug the old internet connection, plug the new one in, and away you go. And by the way, that could be done at 2 o'clock in the afternoon just as easy. It could be done at 2 o'clock in the morning, so you don't have to stay up late to make those changes anymore.
Fantastic. Well, we are out of time right now, and there are a few more questions that have come in. We will be sure to reach out by email after the presentation and get your questions answered. I do hope this presentation was helpful. If you're interested in getting a trial of Bigleaf or talking with Bigleaf about how to deploy SD-WAN to your own SMB customers, you can reach us anytime at sales@bigleaf.net, or you can visit us online, www.bigleaf.net, and request a demo, request a quote, and we will get somebody in touch to help you out. Once again, I wanted to thank you for your time, and we do look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.